Good evening, this is Brastak Zaka Jacob. There's been a major decision today by the district judge of Varanasi that the plea of the Hindu side to allow prayers at the Mata Shringargauri temple inside the Gyanvapi Masjid complex be allowed. The court has ruled that the suit is maintainable, that the plea does not in any form violate or is not a bar from the Places of Worship Act, thereby admitting the plea. Now there will be subsequent hearings in which the court will have to assess what is the original character of this complex and whether prayers can be allowed there on a daily basis. But first, this is indeed a big first step, if not a giant leap, for the Hindu side in their fight to offer prayers, something that was happening in this complex till 1993, till right after the demolition of the Babri Masjid. But first, the story so far.
Celebrations outside the Varanasi court after the verdict on the Gyanvapi dispute. In a big win for the Hindu side, the court agreed to hear a petition filed by 5 Hindu women seeking the right to pray inside the Gyanvapi mosque. The court rejected the Muslim side's argument of Order 7 Rule 11 and held that the suit filed by Hindu parties is maintainable in court. There is also no bar on redetermining the religious character of the complex.
The only issue was whether the suit is barred by place of worship or not. That was the only question.
Earlier, a lower court had ordered filming of the mosque complex, and a leaked report to the court stated that a shivling was found inside the mosque's wazukhana.
Therefore, the artificial walls which are existing beneath the wazu area has to be demolished first, because let me tell you that the arga of the shivling is still to be found.
The Muslim side had claimed that the Gyanvapi mosque is a waqf property and had questioned the maintainability of the plea.
ये जो आज ऑर्डर आया है, इससे देश में अब बहुत सी चीजें शुरू हो जाएंगी। 91 का एक्ट इसलिए बनाया गया था ताकि इस तरह के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जो है वो हमेशा के लिए ख़त्म हो जाए। खुदा ना खास्ता अगर हम 80 और 90 के दहे में वापस चले जाएंगे तो ये हर जगह पर एक डिस्टेबलाइजिंग इफेक्ट पैदा हो जाएगा।
When the hearing commences, the court will decide if the 5 Hindu women can access the Shringargauri complex. But will it open a Pandora's box for other disputed religious structures?
All right, joining us on the talking point this evening, Mohit Paul is advocate on record of the Supreme Court, Rahul Ishwar, author and activist. We'll also be joined by Rekha Pathak, petitioner in this case, Kailash Adhikari, political analyst and managing director at Governance Now, Suman Raman, policy analyst, also joining us, and we'll be joined by Maulana Ali Qadri, Islamic scholar. Let me start with you, Rahul Ishwar. The contention that's been put forth by the Muslim side is you are now, by admitting this plea, by saying it's maintainable and that it does not violate the Places of Worship Act, you are basically opening a Pandora's box. There are thousands of temples, thousands of mosques across the country that were built on temple ruins. You're going to just open this up to a nightmare.
Sakaji, 3 points. One, Will Durant said it rightly, the famous historian, that the conquest of India was the bloodiest story in human history. One. Second point, but we all understand that we cannot take revenge on history. Pujaniya Sarsang Chalak Mohan Bhagawatji rightly said, we cannot take revenge on history. Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev said, we cannot take revenge on history. But at the same point of time, we need to have consensus and reconciliation regarding some spaces. Pujaniya Sarsang Chalak Mohan Bhagawatji pointed out that we cannot search for shivling under every mosque. At the same point of time, Gyanvapi, Mathura are very sensitive spaces. These are extremely important, significant Janmasthans or irreplaceable birthplaces of Hindu deities or avatars or incarnations that we need to talk about. But I understand and respect the inhibition of our Muslim brothers, especially regarding 1991 Place of Worship Act. That's the reason why moderate voices from the believers community, Hindu community, have only been asking for adding of more places like Gyanvapi or Mathura. It cannot be an endless list. Yes, there may be a fringe which talks about 40,000 temples reclamation. We all understand that that is not realistic, that is not pragmatic, and that is not to be done. done. All the senior sober voices have called for these three places, Ayodhya, Kashi and Mathura, because they are Janmasthans. And just one last point, had Father of the Nation Mahatma Gandhi been alive, what would have he done? Let's think about it. He would have called for a Hindu-Muslim unity meet, he would have sung Raghuvati Raghava Rajaram Ishwar Allah Tero Naam, and he would have searched for some kind of consensus. K.K. Mohammed rightly says, who's a famous archaeologist and scholar, says Muslim community should talk with their Hindu brothers and find consensus for these three or now these two places, then there can be a goodwill. And Hindu
Maulana
community
Qadri
should
is
support
also
our
joining
Muslim
us.
brothers.
मौलाना कादरी जी, आज के जो ऑर्डर है डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट का, बड़ा सिंपल सा सीधा सा ऑर्डर है कि ऑर्डर 7 रूल 11 जो मुस्लिम पक्ष का आर्ग्यूमेंट था, दलील था, उसको उन्होंने खारिज कर दिया. उन्होंने बोला है कि ये जो मामला है, ये जो सूट है, ये प्लेसेस ऑफ वर्शिप एक्ट इसको बार नहीं करती है. तो दे हैव एडमिटेड द प्ली मेंटेनेबल है और इस पे सुनवाई होगी. क्या आपको लगता है कि मुस्लिम पक्ष को इस डिसीजन के बाद, इस अदालत के फैसले के बाद उनको छोड़ देना चाहिए? बिकॉज क्या ही मांग रहे हैं, सिर्फ वर्शिप का परमिशन ही मांग रहे हैं. जो हो रहा था 1993 तक, उसके बाद ही बंद हुआ है जो भी ये डेली पूजा और आरती जो चल रही थी. 1993 तक तो चल ही रहा था, तो सिर्फ वही मांग है हिंदू पक्ष का.
देखिए जेकब साहब, मैं तो फ्रॉम द फर्स्ट डे एक ही बात कह रहा हूं कि ये जो ज्ञानव्यापी मथुरा काशी का जो मसला है, इसको अगर हम कोर्ट में चलाएंगे तो यकीनी बात है काफी ज्यादा प्रोलॉन्ग होगा. और जिस तरीके से बाबरी का इशू चलता रहा और जितना हमारे देश में हालात बिगड़ते रहे, नफरतें फैलती गई, कई रियॉट्स हुए, आपके सामने सारी तारीख रखी हुई है. जब से ये ज्ञानव्यापी का इशू रेज हुआ, मैंने यही कहा कि हिंदू धर्मगुरु और मुस्लिम धर्मगुरु आपस में बैठे, संवाद करें और अपने देश के सौहार्द को बरकरार रखें, भाईचारगी को बरकरार रखें. जिस वक्त ज्ञानव्यापी का वीडियो और विजुअल्स वायरल हुए थे, उस वक्त भी मैंने ये कहा था कि इसको अब मजीद कोर्ट में ले जाने की बजाय हमें चाहिए कि हम आपस में संवाद करें. देखिए सर, हिंदू मुस्लिम इस देश में ऐसे है जैसे कि जो है गंगा जमुनी तहजीब. ये सिर्फ जबानी जमा खर्च से कुछ होने वाला नहीं है. आज का जो कोर्ट का ऑर्डर है और जिस तरीके से जश्न मनाया गया, ठीक है, उन्होंने अपनी अपील दाखिल की थी और आज उनको सुनवाई के लिए अपने एक्सेप्ट किया गया और अंजुमन की जो है बिल को जो है रिजेक्ट किया गया. लेकिन इसके बाद भी कितने विकल्प है, हाई कोर्ट है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट है. तो ये जो मामला चलता जाएगा, तो मेरा अपना सोचना और समझना ये है कि इस पर सिर्फ और सिर्फ राजनीति की रोटियां सेकी जाएगी और देश का जो है घाटा होगा, देशवासियों का घाटा.
लेकिन
होगा.
मौलाना साहब,
तो
ये आप दोनों चीजें बता रहे हैं. आप ये एक तरफ आप ये कह रहे हैं कि जो मुस्लिम पक्ष है, ठीक है, अभी वो परमिशन मांग रहे हैं, हिंदू पक्ष की प्रार्थना हो जाए, पूजा हो जाए, ठीक है, भाईचारा होना चाहिए, संवाद होना चाहिए और उससे मामले का सुलझ निकल सकता है. लेकिन दूसरी तरफ आप ये भी कह रहे हैं कि हमारा बाकी विकल्प है, हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट जा सकते हैं, हाई कोर्ट जा सकते हैं, राजनीतिक रोटियां सेक रहे हैं लोग इस पे. मतलब दोनों सही नहीं हो सकता ना. आप एक पोजीशन लीजिए डिबेट पर. या तो आप मानते हैं कि आज का फैसला गलत है, या आप मानते हैं कि आज का फैसला ठीक है, और अगर सही है तो सब लोगों को बैठ के कुल मिला के नतीजे का हल निकालना चाहिए.
नहीं जेकब साहब, मैं कोर्ट के फैसले को सही या गलत नहीं बतला सकता. मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि अंजुमन के पास यह विकल्प है, लेकिन मैं उसकी तायद में नहीं हूं. ना हिंदू पक्ष जो कोर्ट को गया है, मैं उसकी तायद में हूं. मैं ये चाहता हूं कि हिंदू धर्मगुरु, मुस्लिम धर्मगुरु बैठे, आपस में विचार विमर्श करे और इस मसले का सॉर्ट आउट करे.
Let me ask Sumansi Raman, this is what the court said in how it came to the understanding of the observation that according to the court, this is not barred by the Places of Worship Act 1991. The judge said that according to the plaintiffs, they were worshipping at this disputed place incessantly since a long time till 1993. After 1993, they were allowed to worship the above-mentioned gods only once a year under the regulatory state of Uttar Pradesh. Therefore, the Places of Worship Act 1991 does not operate as a bar on this suit, and the suit is not barred by the act. So if they were worshipping from 1947 till 1993, then what stops them from worshipping from 2022 till eternity?
No, Zaka, the question is the status of the place as it existed in 1947. The place as it existed in 1947 was the Gyanvapi Mosque. So therefore, the basic purpose of the Places of Worship Act is to prevent such situations and such issues from arising, which can alter the status. Now, let us by going further with this particular case, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to change the place, the status of the place of worship as it existed on 1947? If you are doing that, then you are flouting the law. The law is very clear. The act is crystal clear. It says that the status of a religious place as it existed on 15th August 1947 shall not be changed, and it made an exception for the Babri Masjid in the, the Ram Janmabhoomi.
Suman, in this case, the petitioner's contention was not that the religious character of this place be determined or that it be changed. All that the petitioner has contended for was there was a certain practice of offering arti or puja, which was continuing from 1947 until 1993, right after the demolition of the Babri Masjid.
So what is the plea?
All that the petitioner is asking for is restoration of that practice. That's it.
Zaka, just 1 second. If the plea is limited to going back to the status quo as it existed before 1993, but after 1947, and there is a complete acceptance that the status of the place of worship is not attempted to be changed, then there may be a case. But my point is, clearly what is actually starting off as step 1 is a prelude to a logical leading towards a step 2, which is an attempt to change the status of the place of worship.
Let me ask Mohit Paul. This is the fear of the Muslim side. This is the fear of a lot many people like Sumant Raman, that you're starting off with this maintainability of a plea of offering worship, but who's to say that it will stop there? Because after all, we've seen the Advocate Commissioner's report. Now the court has said that be taken into cognizance. But ultimately, the fear is that all of this will be used to change the religious character of this place.
But Zaka, that cannot be done. You see, you have to see what the suit is for and the reliefs which are there in the suit. So therefore, I really doubt that can actually happen, and the fears are misplaced.
No, but if at some point the Hindu side takes this forward and says there needs to be carbon dating, there needs to be the incorporation of the Advocate Commissioner's report, what its findings are, so on and so forth, wouldn't that be a prelude or laying the groundwork for changing the character of this place of worship?
You see, as on date, that is not the plea which is there before the court, and on basis of that, the judge has held that Places of Worship Act is not applicable. So therefore, as and when if that plea comes, it will be judged as per the law at that point of time.
Okay, let me also get a word in from our other guest. Let's go across to Kailash Adhikari as well. Kailash, so, one of the things, historically, if you were to look at the records, there is evidence to show that the Kashi Vishwanath temple was demolished. It was later rebuilt. And there is evidence to show that it was during Aurangzeb's time that this masjid came into existence. But be that as it may, the question that's being asked is, that is also part of our history. Why are you making modern day Muslims pay for the sins of omission and commission made by people 300, 400 years ago?
Zaka, the current plea in front of the court is simply where certain petitioners are asking their fundamental right, which they were following, that is the right to follow one's religion and to offer their prayers to the deity, which are there in a certain area of a particular complex. Now, since the matter is in front of the judiciary has taken note of it, and I don't see that this matter should be blown up into any political one, because judiciary is an important pillar of our democracy, the non-discriminatory as well as the impartial one. If a plea has been accepted by the Honorable Judiciary and the next date of hearing, I believe, is stated on 22nd September, then I believe that both the party, that is the petitioner as well as the respondents, must obey by the same. And I don't see any cause of action here which could lead to any political turmoil or any kind of disturbance. The order, today's verdict is simply of acceptance of a plea, and going forward, the plea will be decided on merits. So naturally, we must now see how the matter unfolds in front of the Honorable Judiciary.
Let me ask
Even the
Rahul
Supreme Court, Honorable
Ishwar,
Supreme
the Places
Court
of Worship Act was enacted in 1991. This was in the run-up to the Babri Masjid demolition. And basically what it said was, as per Section 4, that the religious character of a place shall not be changed. In fact, wouldn't it be better that an amendment were brought to the Places of Worship Act rather than go on a case-by-case basis? And there are, God knows, thousands of masjids that have come up on top of Hindu temples because of our own unique history. But if you're going to be challenging this act, wouldn't it be rather better off that the BJP, with the majority it has, brings in an amendment to change this act rather than, individual petitioners approach court, which will just be an endless and needless cycle?
Asaka, two quick submissions. What happened in Babri Masjid and the demolition was a scar in the soul of India. I think every person agrees. Advani ji went on to say that it was the saddest day of his life. And Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the Ajata Shatru of Indian politics, went on to say sorry twice on what happened. We are all apologetic regarding what happened. But yes, that's a very sensitive space for Hindus. At last, Supreme Court came up with a consensus formula where our Muslim brothers got almost twice the amount of land they had in Ayodhya in another place, and a holy mosque is also being built there. Yes, as you rightly said, there is an apprehension in the mind of Muslim brothers because some of our community members have been saying about so-called 30,000, some people say 3,000, some people say 40,000 temples. But all the responsible voices, whether it be the most powerful Hindu organization head, Sarsang Chalak Mohan Bhagawatji, categorically said, we cannot dig deep into every mosque and say a Shivling is there. And he said, we are not going to be party for any more agitation. And there was a particular unique time in history that we had to be a part of it. So understand that sense of moderation from Hindu organizations too. See, there was, as I pointed out earlier, Will Durant said it's the bloodiest chapter of human history. Thousands and thousands of temples were destroyed. But we all, as mature adults, realize that we cannot take revenge on history. At the same point of time, some modifications.
जो राहुल ईश्वर भी दोहरा रहे हैं कि ये सिर्फ 3 मंदिरों की बात हो रही है और पिछले 20-30 सालों से अयोध्या, काशी और मथुरा. ऐसा नहीं है कि हजारों मस्जिद जो हैं उनको तोड़ा जाएगा, उनके ऊपर टेम्पल्स आएंगे. ऐसा नहीं है. सिर्फ 3 की बात हो रही है और 3 की बात ही चल रही है पिछले 20-25 सालों में से.
देखिए जाका साहब, यही हालात को देखते हुए ही 1991 वर्शिप एक्ट जो है लाया गया था. अब रहा सवाल कि ये 3 मसलों को भी अगर हम कानून के हिसाब से अगर देखना चाहेंगे तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल हमको जो है वो 1991 वर्शिप एक्ट को खत्म करना होगा. अगर हम कानून से हट करके भाईचारगी से और आपस में संवाद के जरिए कोई ये तीनों इश्यूज पर अगर बात कर सकते हैं देन ये बात हो सकती है. लेकिन अगर आप कानून के दायरे में जाते हुए, जैसे कि अभी आपने कहा कि कोर्ट की बात जो चल रही है, तो कोर्ट में तो सर आज ये जो है रिजेक्ट हुई अंजुमन की जो पिल थी, अब इसके ऊपर सुनवाई होगी. एक लॉन्ग प्रोसेस से चलता जाएगा. लेकिन चाहे मथुरा हो, काशी हो, ज्ञानव्यापी हो, इनको कानून के दायरे में अगर काम करना चाहते हैं तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल हमको वर्शिप एक्ट को खत्म करना होगा, उसके बाद में ये काम होगा. नहीं तो फिर
कानून के दायरे पर ही आज जो कोर्ट ने फैसले सुनाया आज, वो तो कानून के तौर पे ही हो रहा है ना. कम से कम अदालत की तो मानेंगे आप
ना. अदालत की तो मानेंगे, सुनवाई होगी, लेकिन नेचर कैसे चेंज करेंगे सर? सुप्रीम कोर्ट की रूलिंग को क्या हम इग्नोर करेंगे?
नेचर किसी को चेंज करने की मतलब अपेक्षा भी नहीं है कादरी साहब. सिर्फ उनका अपेक्षा ये है, उनका प्ली ये है जो 1993 तक वो करते आ रहे थे, उसको बस रिवाइव करना है. But anyway, let me go back to
just give me 30 seconds, जेकब सर. मैं आपको बोलना ये चाहता हूँ कि गौरी श्रृंगार की पूजा की अनुमति मांगी जा रही है, तो फिर बाबा दिख गए, ये क्या है सर? फिर वहां पर क्या होगा? तो क्या वहां पर नेचर चेंज नहीं होगा? होगा बराबर. तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल हमको सुप्रीम कोर्ट को ओवररूल करना पड़ेगा. क्या करेंगे हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट को ओवररूल?
नहीं, एक सेकंड. बाबा मिल गए, वो जो शिवलिंग जैसे वो एक प्रतिमा मिला था, उसके ऊपर अभी सर्वे होगी, उसके ऊपर कार्बन डेटिंग अगर कोर्ट ने अनुमति दी तो वो होगी. ये तो पता करना होगा ना कि वो क्या है. ये तो साइंटिफिकली पता करना पड़ेगा कि ये क्या है, कितने दिनों से वो वहाँ है, क्या ये वजू खाना का कुछ स्ट्रक्चर है या क्या ये वाकई शिवलिंग है, ये तो मैटर ऑफ कोर्ट का जो जो ट्रायल चलेगा, ये सब चीजें उसके अंदर प्रूव होना पड़ेगा. But anyway, Sumant Raman wanted to respond to that. You know, Sumant Raman, this is what the court said while delivering the Ayodhya verdict in November 2019, that the 1991 law, the Places of Worship Act, addresses itself to the state as much as it does to every citizen, that the norms bind those who govern the affairs of the nation at every level. Now, the Varanasi court has come to a different conclusion, that in no way is this suit, whose mere remit is asking for permission to pray, violates the Places of Worship Act. That it is in no way attempting to change the character of the place.
Zaka, there will be a lot of debate on what actually defines the character of a place of worship. Now, if we offer puja as opposed to namaz at a particular place, does it constitute change in the character of that particular place of worship? In my opinion, it does. It is for the courts to decide. The point I want to make is...
what if, Sumant, what if that said puja had been happening for a good 30, 40, 50 years, till it was stopped for a law and order reason? Let's be very clear about it. In the aftermath of Babri Masjid, tensions were running high, and the UP government brought about this act to ensure that other, questions of history are not dug up, and therefore, violence spills over to the streets. But it's not like that practice was not happening since independence. It was very much happening.
No. Let us assume that practice has been happening since independence. Now, if the plea is merely to restore the practice of worship, and the matter is to end there, then the courts would need to view it differently. But let's be clear, Zaka. This is being disingenuous to say that why do you want a carbon dating done on the structure to identify if it's a shivling? You are already offering prayers there till 1993, and you are wanting permission to re-offer or to restart the process of offering prayers there. So that is itself being disingenuous, because once you establish it's a shivling, then the next stage of the process goes. Look, it's crystal clear. The BJP says they don't want to pass any resolution on this, on Kashi or Mathura. The clear idea is the pot can be kept simmering up to 2024.
No, that's a political question. Let me ask Mohit Paul, the advocate on record.
Or bring in amendments to the Places of Worship
Let's leave the political question aside. What I do want to know is, if the remit of today's plea, which has been allowed as maintainable by the court, is simply to restore worship rights as they existed before 1993, if that is the remit, then so be it. But why then is the Hindu side saying, we need to examine this quote-unquote shivling that was recovered from there. We need to have carbon dating on that shivling to see how old it is. All of this, and if it turns out indeed that it is a shivling, then will the Hindu side say, okay, we'll go and install that shivling at an alternate location? No, they will want to install the shivling at that very same complex where it was found. Mohit Paul.
See, Zaka, this is not something which one should look as whether it's a Hindu and a Muslim issue. If I don't know whether you've covered this on your channel, but in July this year, Madras High Court actually restored a temple which was following Hindu practices. And when antiquity was done on that temple, it turned out that it was actually a Buddhist temple. And a plea had been filed in the year 2011 that it should be handed over to a Buddhist trust. And Madras High Court passed a judgment in July wherein it has said that this Hindu temple should henceforth be given to the Buddhist trust. So as far as this particular Kashi issue is also concerned, the antiquity, if it comes out, then the Hindus may have an option of either going ahead with asking for the temple to be there itself, or they may ask for the shivling to be excavated in such a fashion where they can have it at an alternate site. End of the day, each person has his right to practice their own religion.
Okay.
And if they find that there is something which is a fundamental practice with regard to their religion.
Vyas, who is one of the original petitioners in this case. Manju ji, यहाँ जो सारे लोगों का जो apprehension है, जो उनका संकट ये है कि वो लोग कह रहे हैं कि ठीक है, आज का जो पिटिशन जिसके लिए अनुमति दी गई है, जिसको मेंटेनेबल कहा है अदालत ने, वो सिर्फ पूजा देने या अर्चना करने का वो जो पिटिशन है आपके, उसको उन्होंने एडमिट किया. लेकिन कल को क्या पता मुस्लिम पक्ष का मानना ये है कि जो कैरेक्टर है इस जगह की, इस मस्जिद की, वो कैरेक्टर को बदलना चाह रहे हैं आप, इसीलिए उसका एक पहला कदम है ये।
जी नहीं, देखिए पहली बात तो वो मंदिर है, इन्होंने ज़बरदस्ती उस पर मस्जिद बना ली है। औरंगजेब आते थे, खाली लूटने आते थे, यहाँ का खजाना लूटते थे, यहाँ मंदिरों को नष्ट करते थे। और ये सख्त ये यहाँ पे हमारे शिव शक्ति, जिसको कहते हैं महादेव की नगरी है, यहाँ पे तो कण कण में ही शिव हैं। तो वो हमारे महादेव जो 12 ज्योतिर्लिंग में जो आदि विशेषर महादेव जी हैं, वो हमारे वहाँ साक्ष्य। हम लोग तो शिव शक्ति ढूंढने गए थे, शिव प्रकट हो गए। माता श्रृंगार गौरी की हम लोग पूजा करते हैं और सभी सुहागन औरतें उनका सौभाग्य आशीर्वाद लेती हैं। तो हम लोग कभी मंदिर के अंदर जाके कभी मूर्ति को नहीं देखा। हम लोग ने कभी मूर्ति को हम लोगों को देखने को मिला ही नहीं, क्योंकि ये लोग ने अपने परिषद में उनको घेर रखा था।
नहीं,
और हम लोग
ये बताइए मंजू जी, अगर ये जो निकाला गया जो शिवलिंग जैसा एक प्रतिमा है, अगर ये वाकई ये निश्चित हो गया कि ये शिवलिंग ही है, तो अगला आपका क्या डिमांड होगा कि वहीं पे आप पूजा आरती करने का अनुमति दें, वहीं पे रखेंगे, इंस्टॉल करेंगे शिवलिंग को, या क्या करेंगे? आपका अगला कदम क्या होगा?
हाँ, अगला कदम यही होगा। हम लोग तो पूरे कह रहे हैं कि आप शिवलिंग के नीचे, आप लोग कहते फुआरा, हम कहते शिवलिंग, तो उसकी जांच करवा लीजिए जाए। मीडिया के माध्यम से सभी मीडियम चैनल्स को अंदर जाके देखने का हक बनता है। सभी लोग जाएं और दूध का दूध, पानी का पानी क्लियर हो जाएगा। क्योंकि ये लोग हर समय अपनी अड़चने पैदा करते थे। हम लोगों को सर्वे के लिए भी इन्होंने रोक लगाया। कोर्ट में अपनी बात इन्होंने पहले अपने पक्ष में रखी, उसके बाद हम लोगों ने उसका जवाब दिया। अब जो कोर्ट ने, न्यायालय ने जो फैसला दिया, उसको तो हम लोग स्वीकार कर रहे हैं। ये लोग तो तलवार की नोकों से इन लोगों ने काम किया था, मगर हम लोगों ने कलम की ताकत से आज बहुत बड़ी विजय प्राप्त की है।
मंजू व्यास,
और हमें लोग को बहुत गर्व हो रहा है। सारे हिंदू, हाँ
मंजू व्यास, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए और आपके जवाब बड़े संक्षेप रीति में देने के लिए। But let me go back to Rahul Ishwar. I think the point that Sumant Raman was also trying to raise, and after that I'll go to Kailash Adhikari. Rahul, is this, that, you know, if it is just about allowing prayers once a week or twice a week or even every day, as it used to happen before 1991-92, then that is not something that the Muslim side has a problem with. But they're all saying that this is just a precursor to A, claiming that structure that was recovered as a shivling, B, installing that shivling, and eventually saying that a temple existed there and that temple needs to be revived. There's no place for the Gyanvapi Masjid.
Saka, I partially agree with what Sumanji said. I'm a Hindu activist, so I know the pulse, how it is going to progress in a certain way. That's the reason why I didn't sugarcoat and I didn't want to be disingenuous. I wanted to be honest. That's the reason why I was being forthright. Even back in 1990s, it was Swami Chinmayananda who first put forward the idea. Then Shankaracharya's came. Then 3 temples or 3 Janmasthan were given special sensitivities. There may be other minor voices regarding other temples, somebody in West Bengal and somebody in other places, but 3 are the core demands of Hindu community or the major Hindu organizations. That's the reason why there is a natural progression. But I understand, as a strong Gandhian and a watcher of Hindu-Muslim unity, our Muslim brothers have their own inhibitions, have their own, their own sadness. We respect and we accept that. That's the reason why some kind of conciliation should be there. That's the reason why I request Maulana Sahib, with great respect, had Mahatma Gandhi been alive, or Maulana Azad been alive, he would have called us both for some kind of a conciliation. He would have called all the Hindu-Muslim communities, and inshallah we can arrive at such a consensus and avoid any kind of confrontation. There may be hardliners in all community, in my community, your community, and all community. They may be taking advantage of these issues. Nobody is denying the fact. But at the same point of time, the moderate voices want peace. At the same point of time, they want temple and mosque and some kind of harmony to be there. That's the reason why it's a nuanced debate. We are not attending any kind of school debate where one side wins and the other side loses. We want some kind of peace, consensus, and at the end of the day, harmony to be there along with temple and mosque.
Let me ask Kailash Adhikari, you know what happened during the Ayodhya movement, at that time the government and of course the BJP was in and out of power at that time. It waited patiently for the apex court verdict. The apex court went into the entire gamut of that issue and decided on the title, ownership, and what exactly or who exactly has claims to that complex. that took 30 years for that verdict to come through. In this case, again, as the Muslim side was saying earlier on in the program, they have access to High Court after this and then Supreme Court after that. Are we looking at another 30 years where another Ayodhya has been created?
No, Saka, that only a time will say. We are not soothsayers. But we have a judiciary in our country and the law will follow its own course. The Supreme Court has also taken cognizance of this particular matter, but it has left that till the time the decision by the lower court does not, that is procedures, the Supreme Court, the apex will not interfere into it. Now, whether it will take a decade, 2 decades or 3 decades, that only time will tell. But yes, I can only say that the law will follow its own course. And if the courts find merit in the petition filed by the petitioners, then naturally it will go in their favor.
So, Suman C. Raman, final word. Ultimately, if this restricts itself to the right to worship, which is a fundamental right under Article 25, then are liberal Hindus like you okay with that? Because I'm not sure where this fear of change of the nature of place of worship is coming from.
Yeah, I think, Zaka, the fundamental concern that everybody has is that the law will follow its own course. When anybody says the law will follow its own course, it has an ominous kind of meaning in India. What people want to see is justice to be done, not necessarily that the law follows its own slow, meandering course. The point is, there are two simple things. The petitioner, who was there a few moments ago, very clearly said that they would lay claim to the shivling. So they are not talking in terms of shifting to another location, assuming it to be a shivling. They are not talking in terms of saying we only want rights of worship as existed before 1993 to be restored. They are clearly saying that this place needs to be converted into a temple. Now, they haven't said it explicitly in so many words today, but the petitioner was very categorical. She did not say, no, we will take the shivling to another place and build a temple there. That will solve the issue completely. I don't think the Muslim side will have any problem with the shivling being taken to another place and a temple being built there. So
okay, let me ask Maulana Qadri.
Zaka, this is a political issue, and the idea is to keep it simmering and up the ante closer to 2024.
Maulana Qadri, there is evidence to show कि 1639 में औरंगजेब ने ये मंदिर को तोड़ा, उसके बाद अहिल्याबाई होलकर ने उसको रीबिल्ड किया और ये जो ज्ञानवापी मस्जिद जो है वो टेम्पल के ऊपर आया था. ये तो हिस्टोरिकल फैक्ट है. कोई ये नहीं कह रहा कि हमें 300 साल पहले जाके हिस्ट्री को रिवाइज करना है या 500 साल पहले जाके हिस्ट्री को रिवाइज करना है. लेकिन क्या ये सच्चाई नहीं है कि some sections, by glorifying people like Tipu Sultan and Aurangzeb and others of the Mughal Empire, the section of society is actually not doing itself any favors. कि आपके लिए सबसे बड़ा डिसर्विस यही है कि आप टिपू सुल्तान को मनाना चाह रहे हैं या औरंगजेब को कुछ लोग मनाना चाह रहे हैं. Let's be very clear, some of them were invaders, they were plunderers. उनको ऐसे ही रिमेंबर करना चाहिए.
देखिए सर, जहां तक के औरंगजेब का सवाल है तो आप औरंगजेब की जहां हिस्ट्री बयान कर रहे हैं कि वो मंदिरों को डिमोलिश किए, तो कई ऐसे भी मंदिर है जहां पर उन्होंने दान भी किया था. टीपू सुल्तान की जहां तक की बात है तो टीपू सुल्तान तो हमारे अपने सबसे पहले फ्रीडम फाइटर है. उन्होंने अंग्रेजों के खिलाफ जंग की थी. ये भी चीजों को हमको रखना चाहिए, ये फैक्ट्स को भी हमको बयान करना है. रहा सवाल ज्ञानव्यापी की जो हिस्ट्री बोल रही है, तो मैं ये हिस्ट्री के बारे में ये कहना चाहता हूं कि हिस्ट्री के अगर फैसला करना है तो वो तो कोर्ट में होगा. हर पक्ष अपना अपना एविडेंस रखेगा, लेकिन जो एविडेंस होगा जिसको कोर्ट अप्रूव करेगा उसके हक में फैसला होगा. लेकिन वहां फिर बात यही आएगी कि वर्शिप एक्ट का आप क्या करेंगे, तो पहले तो उसको सॉल्व करना होगा.
वर्शिप एक्ट का आज बहुत क्लियरली कोर्ट ने बोल दिया कि वर्शिप एक्ट को किसी भी तरह वो उल्लंघन नहीं कर रहा है, ये जो सूट जो फाइल किया गया है.
नहीं सर, आप मुझे ये बतलाइए कि जहां पर पूजा होगी, जहां पर जो है जो भी हवन होगा, तो क्या वो ऑटोमेटिकली नेचर चेंज नहीं होगा क्या?
नहीं नहीं,
क्या
ये
बेसिस पे फिर
अगर
आप
आप
चेंज करेंगे?
बनारस गए हो और ये स्ट्रक्चर जो है इसे देखें आपने, तो आपको साफ साफ पता चल जाएगा कि काशी विश्वनाथ टेम्पल एक तरफ है और ये जो मस्जिद जो है उसके पीछे की तरफ है और बीच में दीवार भी है। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि जो मस्जिद है उसके अंदर जाके प्लेस ऑफ वर्शिप या नेचर ऑफ वर्शिप चेंज करने की कोशिश हो रही है। बट एनीवे, ओके कादरी साहब। हाँ जी कादरी साहब। Okay, we've lost that link. So we'll leave it at that. I want to wrap up this part of the discussion because it's fascinating the legal premise on which the court has said that the plea is admissible and that the suit is maintainable and that Order 7 Rule 11, which the Muslim side lawyers were arguing, is being dismissed. Meanwhile, we're getting a piece of breaking news, and this is a very interesting one because former Karnataka Chief Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy has written a letter to Chief Minister Basuraj Bommai urging him not to observe Hindi Divas in the state by using taxpayers' money. He says it would be a grave injustice to the people of the state of Karnataka. He says India is a land of thousands of languages and dialects, and it's a union of 560 princely states and territories. It's injustice to celebrate just one language. All right, so this is again a familiar ground of language politics, once again rearing its head, this time in Karnataka. This is, of course, on the back of the Hindi Divas celebrations, which Kumaraswamy, the former Chief Minister, has written to the current Chief Minister saying it should not be at taxpayer expense. Let me go across to Ritu, who is joining us with more on this. Ritu, so what is the politics behind why H.D. Kumaraswamy has taken such a stand?
Yes. So as we talk about this language war, we have seen how in the south, especially in a state like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, who has been very specific about the language and they have never stepped back from raising their voice. So this is now that we're getting to see how a former CM H.D. Kumaraswamy is written a letter to CM Basuraj Bommai urging him not to celebrate Hindi Divas in the state because he says that it's the taxpayers' amount and thus because mostly in the Karnataka as well, it has never been observed in such a big manner. So thus it should not be celebrated. One, and then later on, you see, he also goes on mentioning, saying India is a land of thousands of languages, and and the diversity is what upheld in the state. And with all that, this is unlikely that the Karnataka people will celebrate Hindi Divas in such a big manner. So thus he is urging the state government to not celebrate and observe Hindi Divas. But previously too, we saw how the language law broke between the Sandalwood and Bollywood, and then we also saw the reactions coming in from the politicians, and H.D. Kumaraswamy was also one among them who had also raised voice and in a way indirectly backing
But Ritu, what is the politics that the JDS is trying to play here? Because ultimately, all of this is in keeping with keeping an eye on the elections that are happening next year. What is the politics? Because it's not like the JDS, Mr. Kumaraswamy's party, is some kind of a regional hegemon or a regional chauvinist party. It's a party which, of course, is a caste-based party. But then, why are they taking on this wider plank of anti-Hindi and promoting the local language, if you will?
True, but we see, in the past as well, wherein the BJP party somewhere had always backed the Hindi language and have never even opposed whenever there has been such a language law, because it's all that the BJP party has went on to listen to what BJP, the high command has to say, the central government has to say. But because previously as well, when Amit Shah too had put out a word about celebrating Hindi as in the national language, so that time too, the state government did not oppose it, and there was not even a single word that had come out from the state BJP. So that was also a time where we saw how the JDS had actually took a jibe at the BJP party, saying that why is that the state government is silent about it and not raising a voice. So since then, this has been a scene in the Karnataka wherein the Congress party and the JDS party had somewhere always taken jibe at BJP party, saying, why is that, you just have to bow down to what the central government has to say and not look up to the state and the Kannada.
All right.
The Kannada
Ritu, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this story plays out politically. So a first move being made by JDS chief and former Chief Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy. Meanwhile, more breaking news. This is the inflation numbers that are out for the month of August. It's accelerated to 7%, much above what street expectations were. Now, on the back of this heightened inflation, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has put out a series of tweets. She says that this increase is attributable both to an adverse base effect as well as an increase in food and fuel prices. Despite erratic monsoons and negative seasonality in vegetable prices, food inflation in July is still lower than the April peak of 2022. Pallavi has more details on this. Pallavi, so 7% inflation, and that too, bulk of it coming from food and fuel. How worried is the Finance Ministry?
Well, the government has certainly been worried, and she makes a reference to that in her statement, Zaka. But we have been seeing the developments. For example, the DGFT, which is the Director General of Foreign Trade, which streamlines the imports and exports, has been putting a ban on exports on several items. The latest being on broken rice. It's also been on wheat, for example. All of these steps essentially has been taken to control food and fuel inflation, more particularly food inflation, which the finance minister, of course, makes a reference to. What the government is worried about is that this inflation has been triggered off because of what she says, not so satisfactory monsoons, not enough sustainability, and also food and fuel inflation or prices rising. But more importantly, what she also says, she paints an optimistic picture by saying that it's still within the tolerable limits. There's a benchmark which are sent by the economic experts and also by the finance ministry and the commerce ministry. That benchmark has not been breached. That's what her statement also implies. So the government is worried, but not in a panic mode.
Okay, we'll see how the story plays out. I want to thank Pallavi Ghosh for joining us. So the first reaction from the finance minister after inflation clocked 7% in the month of August. We're going to take a break. When we come back, there were dramatic scenes that were witnessed during a police raid that happened in the city of Chandigarh. That and more right on the other side.